Hey guys, welcome back to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It is Vanessa, and unfortunately, Jim is not here with us today. So instead, I called in a big gun to come hang out with me. I've got Ted Kniker, and he has got an amazing story. He and I met in May of last year at the ISPI conference. That's the International Society for Performance Improvement. Over in Phoenix, Arizona, and we just had the best time connecting and chatting. I think we chatted for like at least an hour after one of the sessions, and just continued our friendship ever since. And I said, Jim can't be here today with me. I don't want to do one solo. So Ted, it's time to bring you on board. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Well, before we get started with your bio and letting everyone know exactly who you are, I want to just kick off very quickly with the Kirkpatrick update. So first things first, our 2025 calendar has been published. It is live on our website, so make sure you register now for all of our upcoming certification programs, as well as any opportunities for the Launchpad or any other short programs we might have. And please do not forget to register for the Kirkpatrick Summit. And that is open for enrollment right now. The best deals, the best ticket prices are right now. It is September 9th to 11th in 2025. So there's plenty of time to put on your calendar and block those dates. There is still time this year to get bronze certified in 2024. It is this December. Do not let 2025 go into the new year and you have not met that goal of being Kirkpatrick certified. I know there's a few of you with that on your bucket list and on your vision board. I also know that some of you may be asking for some holiday gifts around this time. So a certification is the great way. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. And finally, open house is happening tomorrow, November 12th. So I'm going to peel back the layers, unveil the curtain, think of me like the Wizard of Oz, and I'm going to show you everything that happens in Kirkpatrick land and show you how we've updated the certification programs and all of those good things. If you are catching this after November 12th, not to worry, we have a replay that you can catch as well. All right, enough about what's going on with me. I want to tell you more about Ted. Ted is an internationally recognized expert and thought leader in organizational performance improvement with extensive executive leadership roles in the public and business sectors. His work as Chief Evaluation and Performance at the U.S. State Department was recognized by President George W. Bush, benchmarked by OMB, and called a best practice by the OIG. Ted is a co-founder and executive vice president of Impact Paradigm Associates, or IPA, where he leads the strategic planning, program evaluation, business valuation, facilitation, training, coaching, and change management business services. Do you ever sleep, Ted?
I do, thank you.
Using systems-based methodology, he consults, coaches, and facilitates C-level, senior, and mid-level leaders in leadership, organizational development, and performance improvement transformation efforts. And he joins us here today. Ted, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you first discovered the Kirkpatrick model? Y'all, this is a great story. Probably my favorite.
Sure. So, I first want to say that, being here on this podcast with you is really an honor for me because the Kirkpatrick model made my career. So I started as a public servant, as grants manager with an agency, had done a lot and moved into evaluation. But also in my background, I come from a total quality management background, as well as entering the government as a presidential management intern. So I have this combination of how do we make the public sector operate better and really achieve the missions that we set out for each other and for our constituents. So that's kind of where I come from and where my head's at. But I think the story of how I came around and discovered the Kirkpatrick model was when I became the chief of evaluation and performance measurement at the Department of State for its public diplomacy programs. Um, my very first day on the job, my supervisor brought me in and he said, Ted, your responsibility is to quantify the impact of our programs on world peace.
Casual.
And so I went back to my desk, started polishing up my resume, kind of thinking about what did I get myself involved with. And so it was about how do we measure and evaluate winning the hearts and minds of foreign publics. That was really what my charge was. And at the time, I really didn't know that much about evaluation. Um, and so, I was searching for all kinds of frameworks and models. And it happened to be I was riding into work one day on the metro, the Washington, D.C. subway system. And I'm standing there and I see somebody reading a book titled Evaluating Training Programs. And so I got into the office and searched and found Don Kirkpatrick's book and started kind of reviewing it online and thought, wow, this looks really interesting. So got it, actually used my personal account to get it. And once I started going through the book, found this is incredible. This is what's going to help us build our evaluation capacity and tell our story.
Amazing. What a way to start a new job. And what I love about what you shared in that story, Ted, is you shifted what you said when you said, well, I was told to measure the impact of our programs on world peace. And then you said, but actually, here is really what it is that we're measuring. I think that's such an important distinction that you're making, because oftentimes we will receive a request, right? Like measure the impact of the reason I was late earlier today. The reason measure the impact of our emerging leaders program on our business. And it's like, okay. But really, let's peel back the onion a little bit and really get to the root of what it is that you're asking, because those are two different requests. And I think traditionally we would say, okay, we need to quantify the Emerging Leaders Program. But really, they're asking about the Emerging Leaders Program, and they're asking about the outcomes from that program. And so there's such a, it sounds like wordsmithing, but really uncovering is truly how you're able to become more consultative and move the needle forward and move out of, the traditional saying, right? Order taker, right, to strategic partner.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So you discovered the 4 levels, right? Mm-hmm. Now, how did that help you then build out your evaluation strategy and the capacity? And then, I'm dying to know, what was the impact?
Sure. So I think the 4 levels really helped us kind of build our approach and our capacity kind of in 3 ways. The first was it gave us a structure for what our outcomes are. And that had been really difficult because when you looked at the mission of the bureau that I was in at the time, it was to promote mutual understanding. And you kind of step back and say, well, that's kind of fuzzy. How do we actually measure that? And so it really helped us define and put a structure around a way to define that. So what does that mean for someone's reaction? What does that mean for someone's learning or their cognitive change? What does it mean? And how do we know mutual understanding exists? What behaviors are we going to see? And then it also allowed us to ask the question, and then what's the result of that we're really looking for? How do we define success? I think the second way is that it also helped give us a framework in explaining to uh, folks who were working on the different programs. Most of us at that time really were focused on moving the paper that we had in the inbox to the outbox. So it's all about that process. And people really didn't connect the process to or directly to an outcome. And it really helped us be results based in how we communicated. And I remember speaking with a number of people that after kind of working with us and helping to define their programs by the Kirkpatrick models, by the levels, that they moved from my job, thinking about my job is just moving that paper, to what's the outcome I'm trying to achieve, and realizing that most of the work that they were doing or that was being done by our bureau was really the investment into a longer term, conditional change that we're trying to make, or at least contribute to. And then I think the third way that it really helped us is by having the four levels. It helped me as the chief of evaluation overcome, at that time, the biggest obstacle I had internally, which was the belief, or the myth that outcomes don't happen for a long time. And so there's no way that you can actually quantify them or measure them. And when I could show people, well, no, there's at least two outcomes that are going to occur immediately from the program. And that is, what is the reaction and what is the learning, or the change in thinking, or change in attitude or affectation. And that really kind of opened up people to rethinking, reframing how they thought about their outcomes, and then also making them much more receptive to further evaluation. And so what it did for us is it helped us become a model for evaluation, especially in the foreign affairs community. At that time, there was something in the public sector called the PART, with the Bush II administration, which stood for Program Assessment Rating Tool, which was a way that the Office of Management and Budget was characterizing evidence of effectiveness of programs. And by using the Kirkpatrick, our bureau scored the highest. We had the highest PART score in all of international affairs for the U.S. government, and really did set us up for a lot of recognition and support from the GAO, from Congress, on the programs that we had, and within the State Department. I always also said that in austere budget times, we were one of three bureaus that had both qualitative and quantitative information about our results, that led to us being one of the three bureaus who had budget increases during that time.
Say it louder for the people in the back. You can quantify what and qualify what it is that you're doing. It's really hard to say, oops, no budget for you, or a decrease. Yep. It becomes a much harder case when you can say this program or these sets of programs are going to contributed to this outcome, and here's those results. If we don't have those things, then what's going to happen? Obviously, we'll start to see a decrease, and no one wants that. So right. Now they're starting to look at, okay, so then where else are we starting to see that we need to adjust? And, one thing that I find that is picking up while you're chatting is, we're not just talking about like training programs, right?
Right.
And I think that we think as an industry that we're the only ones that struggle with proving our ROI, doing measurement, doing evaluation. It crosses all silos in organization, all departments, everyone has challenges quantifying initiatives out, all of those programs, all of those things. It's not just a learning problem, which gives us such an opportunity because we have these 4 levels, very easy to understand. The names of the levels, right, transcend no matter what department you are in. You can understand what reaction mean, what learning, behavior, and results. Like, we get that. We don't have to speak the language of the business. Like, that is business language, right? And it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, let's work on something together to make evaluation a requirement in our organization and something that we're all doing. So when I'm asking for your support, because I may need to tap into some of the data that you currently have, you understand why we're working towards the same goal. It really helps to make evaluation much bigger and helps to build that culture, right? And I think it sounds essentially what you were able to do is make evaluation a culture at your organization that then drove improvements for your bureau.
Absolutely. I think what was really helpful and one like about the model is it's so easy to understand. And people who are unfamiliar with measurement or evaluation,
Right.
or who think that that's some mystic magic, that we do, or that it's just some admin function or management function they don't have to worry about. When you help them frame their program and the value that they create in those steps, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very easy communication process to articulate that value. And that really did open the door for people to think through, what does it mean when somebody in my kind of program, what is reaction? What does that mean? What does learning mean?
Yeah.
And it is extremely adaptable.
Absolutely. And then what else I loved that you shared earlier, which I think is very systematic in our organizations, is we create these policies and procedures or these programs without any, indication of like the result or working towards any results, right? So these things get written, but like, what are they written for? So when you're putting the levels to that, right, and you're mapping it as you're drafting it, it one becomes a decision framework, right? Is this policy actually,
Mm-hmm.
is this program really needed? Is it actually going to drive results? And if it's not, okay, do we keep it? Do we not keep it? And if we do keep it, then what are the tweaks we need to make sure that we're driving results as opposed to just doing things for the sake of doing things? So that's the first, during downturns and recessions, that's the first
Mm-hmm.
way to get a program or something cut, or to just be looked at as inefficient as a department and things like that. Because it's not just about your programs, it's also about you and your work, right? And they want to make sure
Right.
that what you're doing is leading towards results.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about performance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, also too, one of the things that it really helped us do was by having something to base our approach on. It allowed us to have consistency across the entire organization. And to your point, it really did help us build a results-oriented culture in the State Department, because it was easy to understand. People then linked their daily activity to the outputs and then to those outcomes and results, and could talk about them in a consistent way, so that it was really easy to understand how programs did contribute to the ultimate mission of the organization.
Now, I know we've kind of chatted a lot about like all of the power and all of the ability that this is something you can do, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? I'm sure you had some challenges and, these are fuzzy things like, to your point about learning. And I loved how you reframed that
Mm-hmm.
when you're like cognitive, right? The cognitive change. that, sometimes when I'll get stuck for a moment on like the learning level in particular for a lot of things that I'm trying to evaluate or to map up outside of learning. So I'd love to hear from you about some of the challenges you all experience, and how did you navigate those?
Sure. Probably one of the biggest challenges that first really started was how do you define success? How do you define what the change is that you're trying to accomplish? And we could start by asking that question. How do you know that the status quo is different? And what's the evidence? What are you observing that would be different? And when people struggled with, well, I can't, I have this concept of, for example, mutual understanding. I really don't know what that means. We then could break it down to say, okay, if somebody is has just gone through your intervention, what is the response that you're looking for? Can you describe that? And they would start using terms like, well, we want them to be happy with it, or we want them to be satisfied with it. And okay, great. That's a start. That could be customer satisfaction. And then we'd say, well, what else? What are the kinds of things? Well, we want them to think that we gave them, a product, or they see value in this, or that it's relevant to them. Okay, those are some areas. Now, if as you're thinking about mutual understanding, what does that mean, or what changes in people's mind? And what we came up with was, well, they would have a better understanding of the host country. They might have more favorability, more trust, more awareness of certain issues. And we could come up with a number of changes in people's how people's preconceptions of a country or the United States had changed. And then you move to behavior. Okay, well, what kind of behaviors are we looking at? If you wanted to say that mutual understanding exists, what would you see as the behaviors to know that it happened? And we would get things like, oh, that there's changes, or there's still relationships that develop, or there's still interest. People will specifically read news articles about the United States. Foreign leaders. Foreign leaders may interact with more trust of their counterparts. Relationships would exist. In fact, one of the things that came out of using Kirkpatrick was one of my favorite kind of stats that we got out of evaluation was for the Fulbright Scholarship Program, which was the flagship exchange program for the State Department. And what we found in a more longitudinal study was that 75% of U.S. Fulbright scholars were still collaborating professionally with people that they met on their very first Fulbright grant as far back as 25 years ago.
Wow.
Or 25 years at that time. So what we saw was there's this longitudinal kind of thing. And then we would get to, well, what's the results of that? And it really was this more trust, more confidence in each other, being trustworthy partners in the international arena. So there were ways that we could define those things. But I think the other challenge that we tended to have was attribution of how do you, can we say that this program actually contributed to this condition change? And the Kirkpatrick 4 steps, when we combined it with some other tools like logic models, really helped us better define and articulate our program theory, put measurement to that, and to show then the causal linkages and the outcome path for our programs. And so not only could we report, for example, that at that time, I think it was 50 some world leaders were alumni of State Department programs, but they attributed changes in their thinking to their program experience.
That's amazing. I love I love the way that you broke out and really kind of walked us through how do you have that conversation with someone to help them really think through. It's almost like being in therapy, right? And they keep asking questions, right? To
Right.
really suss out what it is that we're trying to do and to help you think a little bit differently. And so I think that, we sometimes want like a sweeping brush that people will understand what we mean, and we're not going to have to take them along to save us time. But I think a lot of our work really is helping people kind of change their hearts and minds, right? And trying to help them to think differently. Now, we've talked a lot about the foreign services and things like that, but you've also done work in natural resource management. And you told me that you were able to adapt the model to be able to measure the impact of natural resource management and kind of do all of those things. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you adapted that model in something that's very far from training?
Sure. So, I would just preface it by saying I use the Kirkpatrick 4 models in just about everything I do. That is my default.
I love it.
So I look for how can I adapt whatever concept or program theory or approach, can it fit within 4 levels or those 4 levels? So the way that I had kind of thought about it is over time, what I found was that most public sector interventions, and I would venture as far as say most nonprofit and philanthropic and academic interventions, really kind of fall into one of 3 categories. It's about promoting behavior change in some kind of people group, whether that's an individual, family, group, community. A second area is partnerships or convening partnerships for problem solving. So you can think of collective impact or other community-based kinds of programs. And the third is infrastructure building or infrastructure change. And when you break all of that down, what I saw in it was in a sense, it's the same process. Is you're identifying who is your intended audience. And so in a natural resources environment, that might be the land. It might be for example, development of a wetland or preservation of a forest. And in that, what is our intervention? Our intervention is we're providing something that we as the program have developed, and we're delivering that to our intended audience. What is the intended audience's reaction to that? And so what we started defining is, and what I have found was that reaction when it's non-people groups, whether that's an institution or a market or a sector or natural resources, is it appropriate? Is it the fit? Is it the right fit? And then is there a positive response? What does a positive response mean in that particular context? And then the learning is, in my view, is what is the adaptation or the access that this has now? And so with natural resources, we started looking at how does that resource adapt to now this change? And then the behavior change is what do you want it to do? What do you want your audience to do differently? And generally, um, that kind of breaks down into what do you want them to start doing that they're currently not doing? Or what do you want them to stop doing they're doing? Or what do you want them to continue doing, but in an enhanced or more quality or higher quality way? And so it really came to how do we define that? So what is that change in the land? So how does it become more sustainable? Or are we containing the outbreak of something? Or are we promoting the growth of something? And then the results, what's the condition change? And over what time period? And so that's how we adapted and how I've adapted it to different situations is looking at, again, how does my intended audience react? Mm-hmm. What is the adaptation or the access they have that they didn't have before? What is that change, whether it's behavior or some other change from the status quo that is our desired? And then once that change is made, how is it sustained? And what is new about that condition? How can we articulate that this is a better condition that we're in?
That's amazing. So you just took us to school on adapting the model and something completely outside of training. But speaking of going to school, you were trained directly by Dr. John Kirkpatrick?
I was.
Tell me more.
It was great. I was at a conference that he was speaker for, and instead of just doing a keynote, he was there for the entire conference and led a few sessions for us. And then one of the evening outings, we were all in a shuttle bus, and I got to sit directly across from him, and it was. It was like being, at the foot of God and just, or, great sage and getting his wisdom about it. He asked me what we were doing and I explained it to him. And one of the things I learned from him, he asked great questions.
Yeah.
And he always had, at least when I was with him in that time, both in the formal setting and as well as that individual setting, he asked questions where it was clear he was curious and he was continuing to learn, and then could provide his expertise back in a way that was really relevant and made sense to what I was looking at. And I think the thing that I took away from my interaction with him was the importance of levels 3 and 4, and really making sure that those are well defined. And I think that was something that I continue to this day, is really focusing on asking that question: how do you define the success or the outcome or the result? What is it you want to see happen? And again, how would you observe that? But I also think too, what was really helpful was he also helped me have a better understanding of how the whole model kind of fit together and how it really builds on itself. And how do you show how reaction influences learning? How does that influence application? How does that influence results?
Yeah. And for our audience to be clear, 1 to 4 will build, but you can't start at 1 to build, right? You have to start at 4 and actually build down to 1.
Yep.
But you've got to make sure that this is a constant loop, that they continue to influence each other. But particularly where that loop continues to happen back and forth is between 3 and 4, right? Because they,
Mm.
the learning or that level eventually drops off for that person or that, that intervention. And now we're hanging out between 3 and 4. That's really where we spend most of our time.
Mm.
And so that's where we really need to be spending our resources. Now, you are now working as a consultant, no longer in the public sector. How long has it been since you left the public sector?
I left the public sector in 2011. So it's been a while. However, the work that I do, all the consulting work I do has been primarily with the
With the
public
public
sector.
sector.
But
Amazing.
I do, a number of things with nonprofit and business now.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the work like now? How is it different? Is it the same? Is it just that you get to do more of it for different organizations? What made you go out on your own and pick this work to continue to do to spread the message of the model?
Um, my, I guess, how I'm wired. I am a public servant at heart.
Mm.
So for me, it's always about how can I help people and organizations realize and reach the potential they all have. And how can I help them understand and define the value they create and achieve it? And and so I think where I came from, just with my experience in performance measurement and evaluation, I was fortunate enough to be in the public sector when that hit really big. And very few people wanted to step up and be in the role of being the evaluator or performance measurement specialist. And what I found was when I was able to, again, kind of put a structure or an approach or framework or a model around people's work to help them see what they were accomplishing, that really had such a positive effect that it changed people's thinking about what they could achieve and what they were achieving, and then how to have the data behind it to know. And so I think where things have changed is now in this day with in certainly in the public sector, the Foundations of Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018, there's so much more focus on having evidence about what works. And this is an incredible tool to help agencies and jurisdictions focus on those things. And so where I am now, in fact, just working with groups in just all kinds of a variety of ways, or program kinds of things. I'm working with a wildfire mitigation group out in California. We just helped establish the Office of Evaluation, Performance, and Data Analytics for the County of San Diego. And
Wow.
the Kirkpatrick approach is underneath all these things that we're doing in helping them build their capacity to understand what they're doing and to contribute to how they improve their policies and their programs
Wow.
and better serve their constituents.
It's so cool to hear of other consultants doing this work and helping to power these organizations or these departments with Kirkpatrick, right? Like powered by Kirkpatrick, if you will, really being able to underpin the work that they're doing so they're able to constantly show that result and to help improve the lives for themselves, their constituents, and their organizations. That's really cool. So tell me, what are you looking forward to in 2025?
Looking forward to being more involved in using Kirkpatrick in a variety of ways. I actually am and I'm not sure I've shared this with you yet.
Oh.
Looking at how do you apply Kirkpatrick to your own personal growth
Mm.
and development? So we do some work in well-being
Mhm.
and healthy workplaces and um, employee well-being as well as personal well-being. And I think there is some adaption there
Mhm.
that makes sense. So I'm looking at getting more out on that, but really focused on helping different organizations and jurisdictions build their evaluation capacity so that they have data to help guide their decision making to improve the lives of their constituents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
That's the future right there. Data driven decision making, especially in,
mhm,
I think people think, AI is the future of the world, and it's yes but AI needs to be trained on the data. And if the data is not good,
right,
right, you're going to be making
right.
really poor decisions. So really the crux is living in the data. Now,
Mhm.
this there's a lot of things that as someone could take away from our conversation today. What are three takeaways you would give someone comes to you and says, Ted, I want to make an impact with evaluation. I just don't know where to start.
First thing I would say is you need to define success.
Mm.
What does it mean for the intervention that you're behind or that you're supporting or working? And really, for that, it's about how do you define it in the eyes of your intended audience?
Mm-hmm.
Both how do you define it for them, but how do they define it for themselves?
Right.
And really having, because I think that underpins anything we do, whether it's an information campaign, whether it's a mental health program, or whether it's natural resources. What is that change that you're trying to achieve? The second is, what do you measure? And ensuring that you have a balanced set of measures so that you're looking at, do we have measures about our activity as a program and how we operate? Do we have measures around the outcomes and around the quality of our outputs? Really measuring how much work do we do or how much effort do we put in? How well do we do it? And then the outcomes, is anybody better off?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third, I would say, is have a framework of some sort, have a tool, whether that's something like a logic model, balanced scorecard, and then support that with a well documented, validated model like Kirkpatrick, something that is easy for people to understand, easy for people to communicate who are not maybe experts in the field. That was the one thing that really helped us at the State Department was people who were not evaluators when they understood what we were measuring and evaluating and how we were doing it with the Kirkpatrick scale, they could talk about it
Yeah.
in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of our political appointees, an assistant secretary, pulled me aside and said, I can't function, Ted, without the data that you're providing me, because you're providing me data that not only shows that our programs work, but is really easy for me to talk about. And it's even easier for our audiences, whether they are congressional staff or other stakeholders. It's even easier for them to understand, and they
Oh,
get it.
that's the best. So make it simple for others to understand. Like Jim says, be bilingual, start to speak their
Mhm.
language, and really think outside the box when it comes to the Kirkpatrick model. of how it can be applied. And, it's not, it's part of the solution, may not be the only solution. Ted, thank you
Right.
so much for being here today. Where can our listeners find you if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So you can connect with me. My email, direct email is ted Kniker, at ipa-llc.org, or on our website, ipa-llc.org.
Amazing. Ted, thank you so much. I hope to see you at the Kirkpatrick Summit in September. I know it's a busy season for you. If not, maybe I'll see you in Jacksonville later
Yeah,
on.
I hope.
Amazing.
Yeah, I hope to be at both.
Perfect. Thanks, Ted. Talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Perfect. Thank you,
Have a
friends.
wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.